What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show here on Sherdog.com. And today I am taking a look back at the year for Cage Warriors. It's been an interesting year for Cage Warriors. I think it ended very well in terms of the last few cards. Now, I'll leave the last card, the New Year's Eve card here. I'm sure there'll be a lot of talk around that here. So I'll talk about the rest of the cards and kind of review them, just so we're not going over anything twice or anything like that. But I think if you look at Cage Warriors' year, I suppose it probably climaxed for the main year, I suppose, with the biggest 2 to 3 events that they've had all year. And that's the way I think you like cards. It was the same in the UFC. They had their 3 best cards of the year, were the 3 in a row towards the end of it. And I think Cage Warriors, it maybe like I do a show over in Severe and make all the chasing pack, and they were down a little bit, and I think they kind of rose as the year kind of went. If you look at the rankings with all the other promotions as well, and what they do, and the differences between Cage Warriors and everyone else. So all in all, I think it was, I would say, probably a middling year for Cage Warriors. It is a year as well that it's not so long since they lost Paddy Pimblett, not so long since they lost Ian Gary. A lot of their 2 biggest stars since McGregor have both gone, but they've developed now a few Irish stars, a few very, very good fighters, and some champions who you're looking at right now. And we will talk about, I suppose, the next stage for Cage Warriors after I go through the cards for the year. But you're looking at the champions. A lot of them might not be there in a few months' time because they might be signed for the UFC. So that's what Cage Warriors are, and they always, they grow new skin and they come back again and they do it again. With the great work, especially, of Ian Dean and Graham Boylan's been in the news an awful lot recently. But they do great work for Cage Warriors. I don't think anyone would deny that. And the fact that they continue to do that is absolutely exceptional. So before I get into the cards and kind of look back on it, there's a few things with all these different promotions that I want to talk about in general, just the kind of year they've had, I suppose. And, I kind of just went through that there. If you look at Cage Warriors, right, and you see so we look at maybe the positives of Cage Warriors. Now, you look at other promotions, right, you say, look, the UFC, we all know the high level of fights, the high level of production, and all of that. You look at One Championship, I would say a similar thing, but they also have lots of different things. They have different parts of combat sports with the jiu-jitsu and the Muay Thai and the kickboxing and all of that. And you look at PFL, they have their tournaments, and they have, they have the $1 million at the end of it, and all Bellator have their tournaments, but it's not, PFL do the season, and Bellator have gone to Ireland and done big cards and gone to Hawaii, and they look very, very different to the UFC and all. I think what Cage Warriors have is what I just mentioned there at the start. They have the ability to keep producing stars over and over and over. And that is what has made Cage Warriors special, and which will continue to make them special. It is the proven path to the UFC, and if you're an up-and-coming fighter, and all you want to, we'll talk about a couple of negatives in a second, but all you want to do is get to the UFC, and you're willing to have 10 fights, we'll say, on the way up to get there, then Ian Dean is the guy to do it. Cage Warriors is the place to do it. If you're good enough to get there, they will get you there. And that I think has been proven with all the lads I just mentioned, plus Nathaniel Wood, Joy Herbert, Mason Jones, and many more. Reese McGee, even though he's back there now, but and they're absolutely fantastic at that. The level of fights they put on as well for the up and comers, and the fact that the fact that they're continually kind of changing their top fighters, the ability to keep putting on that level of fights is unbelievable. It is unbelievable, cards and fights. And as I said again, the proven path to the UFC is a massive, massive thing for them. So I think all in all, for the fighters, it is great to have that proven path and to get a way to get to the UFC. It wasn't always the case for fighters in this part of the world. For fans, it is an extremely good viewing experience. I'll talk more about that actually in a second. And I think for the scene, it's a very good thing to have. Now, I suppose a couple of negatives about it. Look, the first negative about it, I suppose, is that you do lose fighters all the time. And it's very hard to stay up to date. It's very hard to stay up to date with who is the next challenger for this title, and this title. Now, sometimes it's obvious, if Paul Hughes and Vucinic are both there and both still with the promotion, and they both have one is an interim title, one is the official title, or, let's say whoever it might be wins a big number one contender fight. Like, let's say Mehdi Bin Lak there now is probably the number one contender possibly. It's sometimes like that, but then other times, maybe the champion gets signed, or maybe the number one contender gets signed, or they don't have like a full contract with Bellator and they go somewhere else, with Cage Warriors. Or sometimes Ian Dean just signs people, look like Chris Bungard, and I think Delan Monte was one of them as well, if I'm not mistaken, but it's done, and Matthias Frederick was one, definitely. They sign him straight into a title fight because they're good enough, because Ian Dean knows they're good enough. Can be a positive, but it's also a negative. Like, Cage Warriors don't have, I don't mind rankings, but they don't have a roster list on their website, and they can't, I suppose, because of the nature of the promotion. But that's a very frustrating thing, I think, for someone covering them, but also for fans. Biggest issue though for Cage Warriors is the money. Now, we very rarely hear how much fighters get paid, but we hear a lot that Cage Warriors are not paying very well. Now, how much money do Cage Warriors earn? They don't put on any really big shows or anything like that. It's all smaller arena type of shows. That is changing now. They're running the Tree Arena in front of 9,500, 10,000 people in Ireland. Let's see if they fill that, and let's see if they're paying people more. They should be, if they're doing that sort of arena. But no matter what, the pay isn't massive there. We've seen this year with Dominic Wooding wanted to leave Cage, and I think he has now to go to the PFL, and we'll talk about next year. We'll talk about PFL and Bellator and all of that towards the end, and what's next for Cage Warriors. But that, I suppose, is the big issue with Cage Warriors. It's a great place to get you to the UFC, but it's not the best place in the world to pay, which is becoming a more and more important thing all the time with up and coming MMA fighters. You see all the SBG fighters going to Bellator. Now, there has been a dispute between SBG and Cage Warriors, and I think everyone probably knows about that at this stage, so they wouldn't go there anyway. But they're also not going to other places that don't pay them well. They're going to, Brave, or they're going to Bellator and things like that, where they can get paid well. And it's fair enough. I don't criticize anyone for that. And I'm interested to see if Cage Warriors can continue to do that in two different ways. Like, will fighters even come to them anymore if they're not paying well? And if they do increase it, will they be able to remain solvent? And that's an interesting chat, I suppose, we can have about Cage Warriors and about any promotion, I suppose, as the time goes. The same goes for these promotions paying the big money, and it's very, very tough. Now, on the production, as I mentioned, I'll kind of do this for every promotion as well. If Cage Warriors production is exceptional and has been for years, and I haven't said this with any of the other cards or any of the other promotions, because Cage Warriors are the standout. The timing of the fights. You have a fight, it's over, you have the next fight straight away. It's absolutely exceptional, and the production values that moving them on is really good as well. Now, for the big fights, they have, they have video packages and all of that, and they look fantastic, and it's always great. The quality of the stream, look, sometimes at the start of the streams, okay, I might be going on and off or whatever, they get it fixed and it goes. That's the same for everyone. It's on Fight Pass as well, so I'm sure that helps, and it's absolutely phenomenal. Their commentary is outside of the UFC, I think, and even up there with the UFC, it's the best commentary in the world. I think so when they had Dan's Hardy and Strauss with Brad Wharton, I think that was the best three-man commentary about an MMA, honestly, including the UFC and all of that. Brad Wharton is right up there. He himself and John Anik, to me, are the two best play-by-play guys in the world, along with John Gooden as well. I'd throw him in there, and I respect a lot of the other guys as well, not saying anything bad, but they're really, really good. Dan Strauss has become such a good commentator. I really, really like him. And Dan Hardy, I'm not sure if Dan Hardy's still there or not, but he was there for this year. I know he was working with the PFL last time, with the PFL coming into the UK as well. I'm not sure if he can do both of those, so we'll see how that works. But Paddy Pimblett came in, Paul Redmond came in this year, and both did good jobs. So the commentary is very good. I'm very picky about my MCers. I'm not the biggest fan of the Cage Warriors MC. The Bellator MC I think is woeful as well. So yeah, that's overall Cage Warriors. I think it's very good production value. If in the overall sense of the promotion as well, if you're looking for what they're giving, it's the perfect place in terms of that path to the UFC. If you're looking for like the money and maybe a different path to the UFC or a path to Bellator or a path to BFL, it's probably not the place for you, because I know like there was talk before of their contracts only having Zuffa out, so you can't get out of your contract if you want to get, if you get a better offer PFL or Bellator, which, Cage Warriors protecting themselves, and you can't, I don't people are always giving out about that. I don't think you can actually criticize that too much. But yeah, all in all, I think that's the state of Cage Warriors at the moment outside of the cage. So let's review the year. Now, I'm going to look at the UK shows. I know they ran, 3 or 4 of the American shows, well, and European shows, because there's a few Italian shows and things as well in here, but that's one thing as well, one part of Cage Warriors with the US shows. I really don't think they have taken off with the base Cage Warriors audience, whether that's the audience covering the shows or the fan base. I really, really don't. Now, maybe there's San Diego. I think all of them have been on San Diego. So maybe the San Diego fan base and maybe journalism scene, if there is one over there, have taken that up. But honestly, I haven't seen much of it. It's been on obviously very late at bad times. It's hard to tune in for it. But I think with the end of year card and with more cards coming up, possibly we could see more and more of the UK and US turnover. So it might be a case, if I'm doing this again next year, we'll have to do a kind of amalgamation of all the cards, because they will be very much intertwined. For this year up until New Year's Eve, they really weren't. So I'm going to concentrate on the UK ones here, and I'm sure someone else might be doing the the US ones. So Cage Warriors didn't get going until March of 2022. In the UK, they were in the O2 Arena on March 18th. James Hinton against Vucinic. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this was supposed to be Paul Hughes when he got injured, and Vucinic went in there and he fought Hinton. Like, the thing about Vucinic here, I think he's such a very, very good fighter, and so is Hughes, that they are kind of in this place where one of them could beat the other one. It has happened, they've both beaten each other, and both of them are still very, very good fighters. But like, it's almost sometimes like one has to step over the other one, not to just to get the title, but maybe to get to the UFC, and that's very unfortunate. I think what Jordan Vucinic showed at the start of this year was the improvements to his game. Everyone after the Paul Hughes fight and other fights, and rightly so, said he's a great striker. Does he have a ground game? Paul Hughes kind of took him down a couple of times and got the better of him in the first fight, but he went in there against Hinton, choked him out, and looked really, really good. Another guy you could say the similar thing for is Will Curry, who was in there with the champion at the moment, Christian Leroy Duncan, a couple of times, lost out there, and he's probably the second best middleweight for Cage Warriors, but Christian Leroy Duncan is obviously a better fighter than him at the moment. So he's in a tough spot as well. That like, he's probably hoping, look, get that lad signed and get me into a title fight. He won a fight here against Patrick Valley. George Hardwick opened up against Luis Capera. It was a very tough year for George Hardwick, obviously. At the start of the year, maybe the end of last year, where he was supposed to have fights, they fell out. He ended up getting catchweight fights and supposed to have title fights. It was just a really, really, really tough year. To be a Cyril had a very back and forth year. He started it off well though, beating Decky McAleen, and this was a great card. Lanier Kavanagh is definitely one of the guys people you need to keep an eye on. He won here in his debut. Ben Ellis won as well, as did Kingsley Crawford. But definitely Lanier Kavanagh is a name to be to keep an ear out for. Cage Warriors 135 then went down on the 1st of April. And this was in Manchester. So there was I know this was the first card back to Manchester. It was one at the end of last year, but there was kind of a long period of no cards in Manchester, and the Manchester crowd were actually absolutely delighted when the cards came back. Justin Burlinson, after his foray into the Dana White Contender Series, came back to fight Daniel Skibinski, who's a very, very good fighter and a tough guy, and he's been fighting on the, I suppose, more Central European scene for a good while. Came in here, but Justin Burlinson ended up winning this emphatically, got a guillotine choke in the second round. Former champion Matthew Bonner was also on the card, beating Hugo Pereira. Dean Truman came back, but unfortunately he ended up losing. And here's the first Irish guy of the year fighting, second now. We had Decky McAleen in the one before that, but we had Adam Shelley here, we had James Sheehan, Caelan Loughran, Ryan Shelley. So we had a good few Irish lads on this, all of whom won. And it's a very, obviously I'm Irish and maybe I have a little bit of bias toward, well, I have a big bit of bias towards it, let's be honest. But it was a great year. There's no bias in this sentence, but it was a great year for Irish fighters in Cage Warriors, a standout year. And I think it's very important for Cage Warriors to have a well-performing Irish group of fighters. And the reason is, we'll talk about it later on, but they're booked into the Tree Arena, right? The fan base for MMA in Ireland is massive and fervent. I can tell you that myself. I've been at all the cards, you know, obviously running an Irish MMA podcast for the last 6 or 7 years or whatever it might be. And, you know, covering obviously a lot of the fan base and stuff, covering Irish MMA for a long time. It's a fervent, big fan base. The UK fan base, obviously, you know, it's a bigger population. There's probably no more numbers and all that. But a card that happens in Ireland, the same one happens in the UK, you're probably putting double the amount of people into it. So, very, very important for Cage Warriors to have that base from Ireland, because they don't have the SBG fighters, so they need the best of the rest, and the best of the rest need to be performing, and they have. The Shelley brothers, you know, Adam Shelley is on a great run at the moment. He could be, you know, he's right up there towards the title, maybe not title contention yet, but right up there. We'll talk more about Caelan Loughran and James Sheehan as we go, but these two lads are two top prospects. If we're talking about like worldwide prospects to get to the UFC soon, Caelan Loughran, so good at 135. I was watching the 135 fight in the UFC 282 card, the one, the Cameron Simon one, and I was looking at that and I was like, Caelan Loughran I think would beat both of these guys. He's that good. I think he'll be fine for a title coming up. But we'll talk more about him as we go on, and James Sheehan as well. Remind me, lads, to talk more about them as we move on. 136 then went down in Manchester as well on the 2nd. So they were doing back-to-back nights here. They had been doing the trilogies, and the trilogies were in the pandemic and a little bit afterwards. And they haven't been doing now, but they have been doing a couple of back-to-back nights. Do you know what? I really like the trilogies. I like the back-to-back nights as well. I think they should probably continue to do that, honestly. And I think, do you know what, for Cage Warriors as well? Friday night cards. I think Friday night is the key. Maybe Saturday before the Cage Warriors as well. Jatty Milan. I think I called him Dylan Monte earlier on, did I? I think I might have. Jatty Milan and Dylan Monte are very similar names for some reason. Anyway, he lost his title here to Christian Nero Duncan, who I mentioned before as well, went 7-0. Like, Christian Nero Duncan has an amateur record, I think, of is it here on Sherdog? It might be. He's a very good amateur record anyway. He's like 20 fights and 17 wins or something like that. Really, really, really long and astute record. Fighting, made his debut back in 2015 as an amateur. So he's only 7 fights as a pro, but he's a pile of fights, really. And I think it's really shown. And it's interesting as well. We saw it with Raul Rosas Jr. in the UFC there a couple of weeks ago. The IMAFs, the amateur scene is coming through. The amount of people that are being created from that is massive, and they're coming in at a different level now to others because they've had the pressure fights. They've had few fights in the weekend, different opponents, and they're able to live with that. And Christian Nero Duncan is a real personification on them, a very, very good fighter. Aaron Abe then beat Gerardo Fanni. Abe obviously coming through all the ills he's come through and to get there and get the win. Alan Cullen got a win. It was great year for Next Gen as well. Luke Riley got the win on this card. Alexei Mantekivi was on it, as was Mick Stanton, I suppose, two long-term standouts. One of my favourite fighters, Manny Akpan, love his style, and Big Mike as well. Mike Chamu was on this card and got a win. So we move on. Cage Warriors 137. This one the 27th of May. It was my birthday, lads. Send me presents. Colchester. This one was in. Matthew Bonner was in the main event. Dan Dewey's, Adam Cullen as well again. This wasn't the best card in the world, but this was another one where it was the back-to-back nights in Colchester, and the 138 card was a lot better. In terms of the quality in the main event. You had James Webb, who lost to Leon Aliu. Now James Webb is from Colchester. and that was a big loss, obviously, for the town and for for the area. Under that, you some very, very good fights. Oban Elliott came back with a win there. He's had a great year after a loss last year. Luke Shanks had a win, the former champ. Tom Mearns as well got a win there. So, those Colchester cards maybe a little bit disappointing for the promotion. But, I like the fact that they're going to places like that and putting on cards there that maybe a lot of other people wouldn't even think of. So that was good stuff. 140 then was in Belfast. And this was up there with the card of the year. Like if you're talking about non-UFC fights of the year, Rhys McKee versus Justin Burlinson has to be up there. An absolute bloodbath of a fight. High quality, high level. Like, this is a UFC level fight. I think Justin Burlinson very unlucky not to get to the UFC. Rhys McKee went in there. He fought fucking Chimaev and Alex Morono and got caught. Like, how unlucky is that? Like, look how good Alex Morono has been. Very unlucky not to beat Santiago Ponzinibbio. I was ranked like number 7 in the world until he got injured. Like, and Rhys McKee, I think won one round in that fight. It wasn't a blowaway fight. He lost it. I don't think anyone would argue with that. But like, as a young fighter still coming up, only probably 14 fights in his career at that stage, I think he was unlucky not to get another chance in the UFC. But he went out. He won a fight before this, and he beat Justin Burlinson as well, knocked him out. The power Rhys McKee holds early, middle, and late is shocking, phenomenal. And he did that here. He came through it. He got hurt badly, and I'm trying to remember now. I haven't seen it in a while, but I remember the referee told him to move and he was acting as if he was going to stop the fight when I don't think Rhys was in great danger. He ended up moving and took a barrage of shots, ended up getting cut, but never mind that, he came through and won it. Now Justin Burlinson will be back as well, a very good fighter, but Rhys McKee is the welterweight champion. With this, it was a vacant belt. Was this Ian Gary's vacant belt? I think it was. And he went in there and won it. And look, is he going to fight in Ireland next year? We'll talk about that at the end. As I said, we won't litigate the whole card, I suppose, or deal it out, but he could be one of them if he doesn't get signed to the UFC. I know he wants to, but also possibly headline in the Tree Arena could be massive. This was in Belfast, and the headline there was massive for him, obviously, as a guy from Ulster. Caelan Loughran up there at the top as well. What a performance against Festus Orolu. I'll talk about James Sheehan. I'll talk about Caelan later because he had another fight as well that was very good. James Sheehan is a guy, right, who started his first 2 fights and he fought Matthew Bonner and Ian Gary in Cage Warriors. Now, Ian Gary, as we've seen, become a Cage Warriors champion, go on to have an undefeated streak in the UFC. Matthew Bonner, Cage Warriors champion as well. For your first 2 fights, crazy level. And he's come back and won every fight since and looked phenomenal. Looked really, really good. He impresses every time, improves every time. And I think the level that James Sheehan could get to is championship level in Cage Warriors and UFC level, in my opinion. So, there's maybe sexier names with Paul Hughes and other people coming through from Ireland and, Caelan and even Ryan Shelley to some extent. But James Sheehan is one. Don't forget James Sheehan. That's one thing I would say. He's out of a very good gym with Team Rhino. He has the experience of Paul Redmond, Neil Seary in his gym, and Andy Ryan, obviously, the coach. This is a guy you need to definitely keep an eye on. And I think he's a guy who, I could see him fighting, getting to a Cage Warriors title, maybe losing, maybe getting to another one again, winning, and then go to UFC, or maybe just continuing to win and going there. I really think he's a guy who, even if he gets setbacks, I think he'll come back and he will, he'll go a long way. He really, really will. Adam Shelley lost here on this card as well, but Ryan Shelley against Matthew Elliott, if you're talking about contentious decisions of the year, that was right up there. There was so much talk in the local scene about that one. Ryan Shelley spent most of the fight on the bottom but ended up winning. It was a razor thing. It was one of those, did he do enough from the bottom? Did he do enough from the top? So close, and one we could probably argue till the cows go home and never agree, but isn't that MMA judging, I suppose. We'd 1-4-1 then over in London, and this was George Hardwick with Kyle Driscoll coming over from the US to fight for the lightweight title. Hardwick ended up winning the 4-round, finishing him. George Hardwick has been a real standout, himself and his brother as well. Seems like a lot of brothers in Cage Warriors. They've had a great run. in the last while, especially him. His brother looked great actually recently when he fought. But what a win here. What a win for him, and to take home the title. Jim Wallhead came back in against Daniel Skabinski. We'll talk more about Jim in a later card. Mike Figlak in Cage Warriors won here before he went to fight in the UFC. And this to me was a top win against Aggie Sardari. Like, Aggie was the champion before, lost it to Joe McColgan. And honestly, I thought Aggie was going to get signed to the UFC at the time, but he's came up against Joe McColgan, a top fighter, came up against Figlak. Like, you feel sorry for Sardari, right? Because he could have fought Paddy Pimblett in Cage Warriors, would more than likely have won, I think, and gone to the UFC because of that, and probably would have brought Paddy back a bit. Yeah, but he goes in there, gets two way harder matchups in Joe McColgan and Mike Figlak, loses them both, and now is like, where's Aggie Sardari? It's weird the way things can very quickly change when you lose out on an opportunity or when you get a more difficult fight. But look, that's the way the quickie crumbles as well, I suppose. Maybe the shock of the year, but one of the best knockouts of the year. Samuel Bark knocked out Tobias Harila. Everyone was expecting, myself included, Tobias Harila to just win and get the title fight, maybe even win the title at featherweight. But Bark came in short notice. There was a lot of talk coming into this fight, a lot of back and forth, and Bark came in and knocked him spark out. Steve Amiable had a good year. Will Curry got another win here. Adam Amasinger got a win. Matters Flaminas beat Jesse Urholin. Urholin, another guy who's a top prospect, and Matters Flaminas, he should be the prospect killer. I know he had another fight here later on in the year and he lost, but what a performance. Absolutely fantastic. And knocked Urholin out in the second round. Lanier Kavanagh got another win here, and Emil Brown as well, who's a very, very good fighter. Got a win also. Didn't we Cage Warriors 1-4-2 over in Wales? Sam Creasy won the flyweight title here with a first round submission against Stipe Beric. My guy Oban Elliott bounced back here and he beat Matthew Bonner, the former champion. What a win for Oban Elliott at welterweight. You know, he was a lightweight, came up, had a tough, obviously lost to Flaminas, had lost to Figlak before that, but two, unbelievable guys. I just mentioned Flaminas and Figlak over in the UFC right now, but he come in there and he beat Matthew Bonner. We'll see later he went up and weight to win another fight. Oban Elliott, I've interviewed him a few times and I truly believe he is one of these guys as well who, there's no one in the world of MMA right now, and I truly believe that, who's taken as tough a fights as Oban Elliott is. He took the Skabinski fight. It didn't end up happening because Skabinski got injured. Then he went up he was at lightweight, he went up to middleweight to fight a really good prospect out of Ireland and won that. We'll talk about that again in a second. But Oban Elliott, if you don't know that name, you should know it. He's a very, very good fighter in Cage Warriors and someone you should definitely know. Luke Riley again, the third win. What a run for Luke Riley this year. He's climbing those featherweight ranks as well. And I'm telling you, if Paul Hughes stays in Cage Warriors, he'll have a good few lads lining up to fight him in a while. That the Cage Warriors featherweight division is definitely lining up pretty well. Shelley, Bark, Riley, so many more as well. George McManus got a win here. It was nice to see him getting a win. Sean McCormick got a win. Chris Bungard got a win. Went on to fight for the title, which we'll get to in a second as well. But Matthew Bayfield and others got wins here as well in a very, very big card in that one. 144 went down over in Rome. And this was, an interesting card because we had this card in Rome and then we had a Bellator card in Rome. And they put on loads of Italians in this, and it was absolutely crazy. The crowd went absolutely wild. And then Bellator did the main card with no Italians, and no one said anything. It was both. It was just like the crowd didn't speak for the whole thing. But this was the opposite. This was fantastic. Dominic Wooding, who was looking for his way out of Cage Warriors, found it by losing the title to Michele Martignoni. I mentioned Kellen Loughran earlier. I'll mention him again in a second. That could be the fight for him. But a very, very good win. And the crowd went wild for Martignoni. Carlo Pedersoli beat Flaminas in a great fight. A great win for Pedersoli in front of his hometown. Flaminas, though, will be back. I'll tell you that for nothing. Dylan Hazan looks a top prospect as well. And a very, very good night for Italian MMA there. And that was kind of the start of the 4-fight run here towards the end of the year. Great event in Italy, and then we Cage Warriors 145, and this is right up there with one of the best events of the year. Some great performances, great fights. Paul Hughes and Jordan Vucinic in the main event. This to me, if you're talking about, I want to make a big point of this, right? Because the best fighters in the world are the best fighters now. No, the best fighters ever, are the best fighters now. Because the level of MMA has improved so much. You know, the world champion of heavyweight now would destroy the world champion of heavyweight 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. And it goes the same for the prospects. Like, the best prospects in the world now are the best prospects in the world ever. And these two lads are two of the best prospects. And these boys went at it. And Paul Hughes lost the first time in a very close, contentious decision. And this time, Paul Hughes left it in no doubt. It went to a decision, but there was no contention about it. Unanimous decision, absolutely decimated Jordan Vucinic, who showed a toughness that will stand to him in years to come. That's the type of thing, okay, he was beaten on the night and he was outworked by a guy, but you know what he wasn't? The fight was never beat out of him, not once. Paul Hughes beat him and beat him and beat him and beat him, but Jordan Vucinic was there all night and refused to give up. And you know what? Of all the skills that he has shown and proven, what he showed there was a massive thing. And credit to Vucinic, but for Hughes, he showed he was on another level. And I've always known Paul Hughes was a very good fighter for the moment I saw him fighting first. I had a few reservations about him. I think the best thing that happened to this, right, the mental aspect of it is my biggest reservation because of after the first fight and all, what the way he spoke and other things. But the fact that they both fought twice against the exact same guy, Charrier and Hinden, they both fought and beat both of them in between their two fights. And I really think that helped Paul Hughes. Right? I really think it helped Paul Hughes. Having an injury as well, in a weird way, helped him. Because it was no longer, I got robbed in the first fight and I need to go in there and do it again against Vucinic. It was like a totally new fight. It was almost like that fight was it wasn't forgotten, but it was like a new fight. And Paul Hughes looked like a new man and a new fighter and looked phenomenal. We'll see. Will he be signed to the UFC? Will he get will he get into will he be on the Irish card? We will see, I suppose. James Sheehan beat Jamie Richardson here as well, the former challenger for the title. What a win there. What a great win. Modestas Bukowskis came in and beat Lee Chadwick. Obviously he's going to be challenging or already challenged for the light heavyweight title. Maybe been Lakhdar got a win. He could be the number one contender. Kenan Cochran here. Now Kenan Cochran as well. Now I mentioned him briefly before, but he beat Luke Shanks here, the former champion. And what a win. And as I said, Kenan, one of the top prospects in the world. Maybe a guy who went a little bit under the radar until this year, but what a phenomenal year for him. An absolutely phenomenal year. And I think Kenan is one of those guys where he'll be in the UFC in a while. He will really be in the UFC. James Webb as well got a great win here. Obviously, out from coaches were training in Dublin. Looked in phenomenal shape and beat Paddy McCrory. Ryan Shelley, another good win, as I said, against Josh Reed. Everyone, Josh Reed, you expect Josh Reed to be in a barn burner, but Ryan Shelley destroyed him really here. Oban Elliott, as I mentioned, that middleweight fight one here. George Hardwick looked great against Evie Amiable, and Adam Shelley bounced back with a win here as well. So a great night for Cage Warriors. Up there as one of the cards of the year. Phenomenal card. Then we had 146 and 147, which went down at the start of November. 146 first. Christian Leroy Duncan again went in and made easy work of Marian Dimitrov, beat him in the first round. Jim Walley took the interim title, so he's going to be fighting Rhys McKee. Will that be in Ireland? Will it be against Rhys McKee? I think it will. After Adam Cullen, Luke Riley got back in there with wins again. James Hinden got a win. Lucas Capera got a win. Samuel Bark again beat Manny Akpan. Great fight that was. And in the 147 card, saw George Hardwick beat Chris Bungard. I didn't think it was Hardwick's best performance against, kind of an outmatched Bungard. I'm sure he'll be moving on after that. Morgan Charrier as well, a split decision. Seems like every Morgan Charrier fight's a split decision, but he moves on. If Paul Hughes goes to the UFC, I think it'll probably be Charrier versus Vucinic for the title again, so that'll be interesting. Will Curry, what a bounce back year for Will Curry, another win. Jay Quinn Hayes as well, he's got 2 or 3 wins this year. Orman Shaban, another guy fighting out of Team KF in Ireland, beat George McManus, looked phenomenal in doing it. Matthew Bonner won, and that kind of saw it out until the end of the year card as well. So all in all for Cage Warriors, I think some phenomenal performance. A great year for Irish MMA and Cage Warriors, great year for their the championship scene in Cage Warriors, I think, is absolutely phenomenal. I spoke, of the UFC preview. I'm not sure if it's out or not before this, but in that one, I was talking about how this year wasn't a great year for the championship scene in terms of Izzy lost as one of the big draws. McGregor didn't fight. And when I say championship season, I mean like the top people who you would want winning. John Jones didn't fight. Masvidal didn't fight. For Cage Warriors, obviously at a different lower level, you had the guys who I suppose you would want winning, and Paul Hughes, Christian Leroy Duncan winning those fights. You had Kenan Knocker winning. You had the other Irish lads coming through winning. It was a good year for Cage Warriors in terms of the results and in terms of the fights as well. It's absolutely fantastic. So to look ahead to next year, the big thing for Cage Warriors next year, will Dan Hardy be there in the commentary booth is one thing I want to know. I hope he is. It'll be great. This big Irish show is the next thing. And PFL and Bellator being in the area are the three big things. So, Dan Hardy, if he's there, grand, we can leave that one. The Irish show, I truly believe they need to stack this. And I'm not just saying this because I'm Irish, but this is a big arena. They usually do smaller arenas. Last time they came to Ireland, they were down in Cork and it was, only a couple of thousand people there. That's usually, a couple of thousand is usually what they do. And this is a big, big arena. I think they need to stack it. I think they need Rhys McKee on the card against Wallhead. I think they need Kenan Knocker against Martignoni for the bantamweight title. And I would love if they could get Paul Hughes. Maybe that's not feasible, but I think they need at least 2 title fights there. You could have a big fight. Adam Shelley against Luke Riley. I think anyone who's just listened to this will probably know how good those two lads are. Put them on it. I'd love to see Oban Elliott against James Sheehan. I love that fight. But, I'm not doing Ian Dean's job for him here, although, maybe I'm a little bit. But that's a big card for them. And that also adds to the third point about, especially the PFL, I think, coming in, because PFL have signed some really good guys from the scene already. The likes of Dominic Wooding's going there, I think. Will Flory is signed there, and a few others as well. They already have Brendan Loughlin and other people. So will they be putting on cards this year? Like they've already talked about this European series, this tournament and all. How much money is going to be on the line there? Are they going to be able to get to the big tournament? That's a big, big thing. It could hinder Cage Warriors, could hurt Cage Warriors. So it's very interesting to see how that works out over the next year. And I suppose time will tell on that. But yeah, all in all, it was a very good year for Cage Warriors. Maybe a little bit of a slow start, but it got going. And I think we have 5 fights set out for next year already, I think, for Cage Warriors. And with the Irish one obviously being the big one of them coming up, I think that's a great thing for a promotion. I really do think it's a great thing for a promotion to have that set out and have it ready. So here are the cards. 149 is going to be on March 3rd over in San Diego. And then we have London, Manchester and Dublin on March 17th, 24th, April 15th and April 29th in the Tree Arena here in Ireland. So great to have those and a great run for Cage Warriors. I am very interested to see what they do next year after a great year for them. And we'll be here to talk about it all. So I will leave it there, lads. Thank you very much, and ladies. Thank you very much for listening. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com. Happy holidays. And we'll see you all next time. Good luck.